Philo of Alexandria was a first century Jewish Greek philosopher, and he is important to us because as a Jew, he sought to reconcile the teachings of Greek philosophy with those of his monotheistic religion. As a result of this, he became an outcast for the Jewish community, but a hero unto the Gentiles. Now, while he was meditating, he heard a voice that told him that in the one living and true God, there were two supreme and primary powers, goodness and authority, and that by his goodness he had created everything, and by his authority he governed all that he had created. Further on he says, now of this ruling authority and of this goodness, being two distinct powers, the cherubim were the symbols. Philo sought to allegorize everything in the Bible. Philo's method of interpretation was the allegorical method, and we see that everything that he read in the Bible, he gave it a different interpretation. He says, for thus God allotted 3 days to eternity before the appearance of the sun, and those which came after the sun he allotted to time, the sun being an imitation of eternity, and time and eternity being the two primary powers of the living God. He says, the one is beneficent power in accordance with which he made the world, in respect of which he called God. The other his chastening power, according to which he rules and governs what he has created. And then he says, here he states to be divided in the middle by him standing above them both. For thus says he, I will speak to you from the mercy seat in the midst between the two cherubim. Philo would go on to call his two powers, he would call it God, his word, and wisdom. Now we go to Genesis 1:26 and we find out that Philo attributed the creation to two other creators. He says, and he would not err who should raise a question why Moses attributed the creation of man alone, not to one creator, as he did that of other animals, but to several. And then he says, it is on this account that Moses says, at the creation of man alone, that God said, let us make man. That's Genesis 1:26, which expression shows an assumption of other beings to himself as assistants, in order that God, the governor of all things, might have all the blameless intentions and actions of man when he does right attributed to him, and that his other assistants might bear the imputation of his contrary actions. What did Philo mean by this? He meant that God was a transcendent God, and that he was too good to be involved with the creation of the world. Thus, he needed those two powers to help him with creation. Philo writes that Abraham met the triad or the Trinity of persons in Genesis 18 and 19. Listen to this, that Abraham, he beheld 3 men traveling, and he did not perceive that they were in reality of a more divine nature. And then he writes again, and he says, it then perceives a threefold image of one subject, one image of the living God, and others of the other two, as it were shadows that came from it. And then he says, the one in the middle is the Father of the universe, who in the sacred scriptures is called by his proper name, I am that I am. And the beings on each side are those most ancient powers which are always close to the living God, one of which is called his creative power, and the other his royal power. And the creative power is God, for it is by this that he made and arranged the universe. And the royal power is the Lord, for it is fitting that the Creator should lord it over and govern the creature. Therefore, the middle person of the three, being attended by each of his powers, as by bodyguards, presents to the mind, which is endowed with the faculty of sight, a vision at one time of one being, and at another time of 3. Something powerful develops when you connect the writings of the Ante-Nicene Fathers, volumes 1 through 10, with the writings of Philo. It is these men who came before the Council of Nicaea, that is why they're called Ante-Nicene, And these men are credited with following after Philo and obeying the writings that he wrote and keeping them as something very special. Now, history tells us that the Apostolic Fathers, the very first fathers, Ignatius of Antioch, Tatian, Athenagoras, Justin, Theophilus of Antioch, were the men who took Philo's teaching on the Logos and wisdom, and from there connected with John 1:1 and gave it what we now call the Logos Christology. Although Trinitarian scholars tell us that these men did develop the Logos Christology in history, somehow they overlook the fact that one of these apostolic fathers, Theophilus of Antioch, also started writing, was the first to coin the word Trinity in the writings of the apostolic and Ante-Nicene fathers. So it is a big error on the part of scholars and historians that they know about the Logos Christology, but they don't follow through and find out that these men also believed in the Trinity that Philo was teaching. And they also allegorize the scriptures to make them fit and to make the Trinity fit in the Bible. This is so important. Listen to this, where Theophilus of Antioch talks about the 3 days, the same as Philo of Alexandria. It is very, very important. It says, the 3 days which were before the luminaries are types of the Trinity of God and His Word and His wisdom. And he also says, moreover, God is found, as if needing help, to say, let us make man in our image, to no one else than to His Word and wisdom did He say, let us make man. According to Trinitarian scholars and even the Catholic Church, the Ante-Nicene Fathers continued with the Logos of Philo and the Trinity of Philo. How do we know this? You can look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and it clearly states there that it was the Fathers that came before Nicaea that developed the doctrine of the Trinity to a certain point. So it was when they came to the Council of Nicaea that they expounded these things that they had taken up from Philo of Alexandria, those being the Logos Christology and the triad or Trinity of persons. At the Council of Nicaea 325, the Roman Emperor Constantine had a problem because the bishops were divided among two different views. And Constantine sought to reconcile his empire together under one religion. And so the winning factor was the teaching of the Trinitarians, who pushed very hard to get the Trinity to be accepted by all. And this is history, that the Trinity won out and beat other views that came earlier, including that one of Arius. But history tells us that after the Council of Nicaea, even some years later, Constantine reverted back to the teaching of Arius and not the Trinity. Listen to the doctrine of Christ that was written in the 1st century. Whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your house, nor greet him, for he who greets him shares in his evil deeds. 2 John 9-11. The doctrine of Christ was written by the 1st century church of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, the doctrine of the Trinity came to us in the 4th century, and it was declared state law. So the Trinity, historically, is not part of the doctrine of Christ. It is a man-made doctrine and the traditions of the philosophers of Rome. Many centuries later, a woman by the name of Madame Blavatsky wrote the Theosophical Glossary among many other books. And she includes Philo of Alexandria in this glossary, which is a satanic or an occultic glossary. And she includes him there because she says and she wrote that there was no one to equal the esoteric knowledge that Philo had in the first century. And this knowledge kept going for many centuries. No one could equal his knowledge for centuries. This is very crucial because this puts the Trinity in the category of the occult. It puts the Trinity in the category of mysticism and even of the Kabbalah. Yes, the Trinity came from Babylon, but it was introduced into the church by Philo of Alexandria and the Apostolic and Ante-Nicene Fathers.